Hello everybody, my name is Wyatt and welcome back to another awesome reaction video, and today we're going to be reacting to an Apple Sleep Experiment. It's an MLP fanfic reading grimdark story written by the one and only Magpiepony. Narrated by TheLostNarrator, of course, with special guest VAs Mag as Apple Bloom and Trixie. I am Shadow007 as Twilight Sparkle, Goody Serenade as Filthy Rich, Katie Patterson as Granny Smith, various Phantom VAs Big Mac and Narrator 2, Catty Bug as Scootaloo, Sparkling Lemonade as Sweetie Belle, Pegasus Pitch VA as Flim, DeWilsonator as Flam, Gina M as Lyra Heartstrings, Asian Old Fluffy as Reality, Lilith VA as Pinka Pie, Story Flame as Flute to Shy, and Goomba Guy Videos as the disclaimer boss. We got tons of artists here, but we are going to watch this awesome horrifying story because there is a sequel to this story now. But I have been wanting to unveil this for a very long time. If you guys are curious, I have an Applejack plush. What? And I got the new Lost merch. I will gladly put that up here. The new Lost Never Ending Nightmare 2023 to show my support and dedication to Lost for being on here for 10 years. I got my AJ plush, my t-shirt, and my RD plush. We're both gonna chill, and I'm bracing myself for this awesome story. So here we go. In 3, 2, 1, play.
Warning. The following reading contains subject matter that some listeners might find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
Listener discretion is advised. Deceiving tales from a lost mind. Huh? Okay. Interesting.
Applejack wiped the sweat from her brow as she and her brother, Big Macintosh, hauled their last cart of apples towards the barn. It had been an unbearably hot afternoon in Sweet Apple Acres, and Applejack wished for nothing more than to put her hooves up and enjoy a cold mug of cider.
Makes sense.
Can you get the last bushel to the other end of the barn, Big Mac?
Applejack asked. On any other day,
and Losty's
she
playing
might
as
not have let
Applejack.
on that she needed help, but she was far too hot and sore to worry about her pride.
Yup.
Came his short reply. Big Mac was also drenched with sweat, but somehow maintained his grin and calm demeanor.
Ooh-wee, that's some sort of weather we're having, ain't it? I hope it's a mite different when the Zap Apples get here. Not sure they'll be able to stand it with this kind of heat.
Applejack said, breathing a sigh of relief when she was finally able to release the harness of the apple cart she was carrying.
Yup.
See you inside, Big Mac.
Applejack said, already out of the barn door as she bade him farewell. Applejack's iconic hat seemed to offer no relief from the sunlight on her trek back to the house.
The iconic
Tired,
hat.
sore, and irritable, her only solace for the day's labor was the thoughts of refreshment and relaxation. However, when she rounded the corner, she spied a familiar-looking carriage with the iconic dollar symbol on the side, the trademark of the business tycoon Filthy Rich. 2 earth ponies harnessed to the carriage nodded in her direction as an informal greeting, and Applejack warily nodded in return. She wondered why Filthy Rich would be visiting the farm so soon, as he usually only appeared when the Zap Apple Jam was prepared and ready for sale. Applejack was surprised to see the front door open and peered inside suspiciously. She found Filthy Rich talking to Granny, who was sitting in the corner looking timid and frail, curled up on her rocker with a tremble in her hooves. It didn't take long for Applejack to understand that this was not a pleasant visit.
You owe a great deal more than that, Granny Smith, and I, for one, would hate to see you lose this farm.
Filthy Rich said, all manner of pleasantry gone in his tone. Granny Smith looked up at him with wide and pleading eyes, but before she could answer, Applejack came to the rescue.
What in tarnation are you talking about?
Applejack asked sternly. She narrowed her eyes and glared at Filthy Rich, protective instincts taking priority over common sense.
Your granny here is in quite some debt with me, young filly, and it's high time I'm paid my money.
The Apple family hasn't borrowed money from you in ages.
Applejack protested, stomping towards him with a growl.
Now hold on there, Applejack. That ain't quite true, young'un.
Applejack broke her glare to look at Granny in confusion.
Why did she borrow the
What do
money
you
for
mean,
her?
Granny?
Well, I didn't want to worry you none, but this season hasn't been too kind on Sweet Apple Acres, and we've been needing an extra bit or two to keep up with work demand. It's a bad weather spell is all, it'll pass.
That may be so, but what has passed is my deadline. What with interest and everything, I'd say you'd owe about half of your farm's worth by now.
Half the farm? Granny, why didn't you tell me we were hurting for money?
Now, Applejack. This here is my business, so don't you worry none. You're a reasonable pony, Filthy. Can't we work something out?
I believe I may know just the thing.
Filthy said, calming his speech a little and straightening his necktie.
I think I could overlook this little debt of yours if you gave me twice the amount of Zap Apple Jam this year.
But you already take half.
Precisely.
Wait a minute. You want to take our entire supply of Zap Apple Jam this year? We need that money along with the cider sales just to keep this family going during the winter.
Well, the way I sees it, y'all don't have much of a choice now, do you, Missy?
You can't actually be considering this, can you, Granny?
Well,
I'll be by in 2 weeks for my product.
Filthy Rich said, having already considered this a done deal.
And I'll be counting them jaws too, so don't go thinking y'all can just hold out on old Filthy Rich. I get every last jar, or this farm goes into foreclosure, you hear?
Applejack was stunned into silence. Filthy Rich cleared his throat a couple of times, until she snapped out of her trance and realized she was blocking his exit. With his head held high, Filthy Rich left the farmhouse with a sarcastic,
Good day.
Applejack waited until he had gotten into his carriage and was out of hearing range before she confronted Granny again.
What are we gonna do if we don't get those Zap Apple Jam earnings this year? We can't pay off a debt if that means we'll be hurting for money in the winter months.
your Granny Smith always thinks of something, Applejack. You just worry about harvesting those Zap apples and leave the rest to me, you hear?
Granny said, offering her an apologetic smile. Applejack didn't reply. Instead, she looked back outside the open door to see the sorry state of the apple trees, baking under the unforgiving heat of the sun. If the rain stalled much
are they in a
longer,
drought,
she
I
knew
think?
her family's troubles were only going to get worse.
Were they in a drought? I guess they're in a drought, because if they haven't had rain, then it's a drought. Okay. Interesting.
As predicted, the next day saw no improvement for the Apple family. Things had taken a sharp turn for the worse, and Applejack resigned to the fact that she couldn't solve this issue on her own. She raced from Ponyville Hospital to consult the only pony she knew that could figure her way out of this mess.
Twilight!
Applejack called, letting herself into Twilight's castle.
Okay.
Are you in there? I need your help.
It wasn't too long before Applejack found the princess pacing in the library. She noted that Twilight looked a little more haggard than usual. There were beads of sweat along her brow, and her usually kept mane was hastily tied in a ponytail to keep it off of her neck. In that moment, it dawned on Applejack that even royalty were victims to the unusual weather, and that wasn't a good sign.
Just in case if some people don't know, the Apple Sleep Experiment, this story is actually based off of another story of an original creepypasta called The Russian Sleep Experiment. And basically that story is about scientists created this some kind of antidote where they don't go to sleep, where these Russians don't go to sleep or something, I don't really know, and then they start seeing hallucination and they start killing each other, apparently. And in this case, I think that is what happens, except I don't think it has to do with anything with a, like, testing or anything like that, or a lab or anything like that. Because I'm curious what this is going to be about.
What is it?
Twilight asked, snapped out of her pacing by her friend's entrance.
It's a lot of things, really.
She hid the dark circles under her eyes with her hat, hoping she didn't look as dreadful as she felt.
I came to you because I don't have any other option.
Tell me what's happened.
Twilight said, her voice edging on a strange combination of concern and impatience.
First things first. Have you heard anything from Rainbow Dash regarding the weather?
Twilight let out a frustrated sigh. Apparently, that was not the right question to ask.
No, it seems Ponyville isn't the only place suffering this heat. There's a terrible drought all over Equestria. I've heard that Rainbow production has completely shut down for the time being. It seems Pegasi are having a hard time finding enough water to make clouds, let alone rain.
I was afraid of that. And the princesses? What do they say?
Princess Celestia and Princess Luna are looking into a spell that can allow salt water to be transformed into rain clouds. For some reason, it doesn't process the same in Cloudsdale's weather machines. If a spell can be found in time, the water from the ocean will save us. But until then...
Twilight stated, but trailed off at the end, so Applejack came to the terrifying conclusion on her own.
I offered to help, but they said I'm needed here instead. I've been scouring my books for anything weather-related, but so far, nothing's been remotely useful.
Twilight said, gritting her teeth. She hated the thought of being unhelpful in a time of crisis.
Well, I sure need you.
Applejack offered, wishing she could smile in comfort, but unable to do so given the nature of her visit.
It's Big Mac. He got wind of Granny's debt to the rich family, and he worked himself to the bone harvesting apples. I think he was hoping to make some extra money before the Zap apples got here. Darn fool was out in the sun so long he went and got himself sick with a heat stroke.
What?
Oh no.
Is he?
He's gonna be all right. Doctor says he's got to stay in the hospital for a few days.
Wait. If Big Mac's too sick, that means... the Zap apple harvest. He isn't going to be well in time, is he?
That's precisely why I'm here.
Oh, Applejack. I want to help. I really do, but...
I know, Twi. You've already got a lot on your plate. I don't come asking for your help like that.
Then what do you need from me? Anything I can do to help, I'm happy to do it.
I seem to recall a spell you said you had been working on. If I remember right, it was supposed to help you stay up studying on the nights Princess Celestia gave you those ridiculous reading assignments.
Yes, but how will that help you?
Well, I may not be studying late into the night, but I need to figure out a way to stay awake long enough to get all those Zap apples harvested.
Oh, I don't know, AJ. I haven't perfected that spell yet, and I have no idea what kind of side effects it might have. Besides, you'd be using it to keep up your strength. All I needed it for was to stay awake a couple more hours for reading.
Why? I wouldn't ask if it wasn't absolutely necessary. Granny's gotten us into quite a financial pickle, and if I don't meet Filthy Rich's quota, I could lose the farm.
Applejack admitted.
Oh, I mean, you could ask Apple Bloom for help, but I get it. She's just a filly. Like, she has, I think, the job of being the catcher or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but Apple Bloom's a filly. So, yeah, I kind of get it. Like, you're right now the only one who can do something.
Unable to conceal the panic in her tone. Twilight furrowed her brow and opened her mouth to protest, but was unable to find the right words. Feeling the pressure of the situation and the frantic pleading in her friend's voice, she knew she couldn't refuse.
I hope you know what you're doing, Applejack.
She cautioned, leading her friend from the library to retrieve her spell. The sun's heat showed no remorse on the day of the Zap apple harvest. Despite the severity of their situation, the Apple family found it difficult to gain any outside assistance. Most of the extended Apple family was tending to their own dying orchards, and Applejack's friends all had places to be. Still, there were a few kind Ponyvillians willing to lend a hoof, though most of them didn't last more than a few hours under the sun. Yep. By the day's end, only Apple Bloom and Applejack remained. When the
I heard something.
sun finally set over the horizon, Apple Bloom collapsed on the ground, grateful that the heat would finally subside. Although Applejack felt her own looming exhaustion, she was too stubborn to give up the work. She looked at a few bushels they'd collected, and then at the remaining Zap Apple trees, realizing that despite their hard work, more than half of the bucking was left to do. Soon after sunset, Granny Smith emerged, struggling as she walked with what appeared to be 2 glasses of lukewarm cider.
Sis, are you coming in? Granny says there's fresh pie inside.
Apple Bloom asked her older sister warily.
No can do, Apple Bloom. I was hoping we'd get through more of the trees before sundown. You know as well as I do that these disappear at midnight.
Now, Applejack, we done our best. Besides, I can tell you're about to drop, young Billy, and I'm not about to have another grandchild in the hospital from exhaustion.
That ain't gonna happen, Granny. Y'all go on ahead. There's still a few more minutes of strength left in these here legs of mine, and I want to make sure we get all the Zap Apples we can get.
Applejack said, walking away from them. Applejack knew it worried Granny to see her working this hard, but she also knew she couldn't risk letting on how important this was with Apple Bloom around. Thankfully, every pony had kept quiet about their finance problems around the little filly. As Applejack wandered from one tree to another, she could feel the contents of her saddlebag moving in rhythm to her steps. Somewhere, buried beneath her supplies, was a little potion vial that hopefully had the answer to her problems. When Twilight produced the sleep preventative potion the previous day, it came with a strongly emphasized condition. Applejack had to promise to use this as a last resort, an absolute
We're only in the
last
video
option.
for 14 minutes. We're only
Twilight
14
was
minutes
worried
in.
that the side effects might cause more damage than what it was worth, as she hadn't had time to truly study them. Applejack could see the genuine concern in her friend's expression, and gladly made the promise, even knowing full well that she intended to use it. Still, staying true to her word, Applejack gave the Zap Apple bucking her best effort without it. It was an hour or so after sunset that she could feel her body threatening to shut down. Her muscles tensed up, and her vision became hazy, causing her coordination to suffer. Although the sun was long gone, beads of sweat were still rolling off her cheeks, and her breathing became raspy and short. In her rapidly escalating exhaustion, Applejack made a miscalculation in her bucking, and ended up being pummeled to the ground with Zap Apples. She groaned and put a hoof to her throbbing head, shaking some apples loose from her hat. Applejack heaved a sigh as she carefully pulled Twilight's potion out of her saddlebag and held it up in the moonlight.
I'm sorry, Twi, but I've got to save the farm.
She pulled the cork free from the potion vial and downed it in one gulp. However, the moment she drew the vial away from her lips, she felt a wave of unbearable sickness. Clasping her mouth with her front hooves, she turned away from the Zap Apple trees before the potion and most of her dinner came back up with a vengeance.
That don't feel good. It's funny when every time I see like a show or a movie of any kind, when they drink a potion, or oh god, I said potion. I meant potion. When they drink it, they throw up, and that is crazy. What is it, like some kind of side effect where like if after you eat something and you drink a potion, it's just gonna make you throw up? My god, I wouldn't want that to happen.
Apple Bloom
Jesus.
awoke just after sunrise when she heard a crash coming from the kitchen. She wiped the sleep from her eyes as she quietly trotted downstairs to see what was happening. When she entered the kitchen, she was surprised to see row upon row of jars filled with freshly prepared Zap Apple jam. Somewhere hidden behind them, she could see the outline of her older sister, who was busily stirring the current pot of jam while simultaneously measuring out the correct amount of honey.
Sis,
Apple Bloom, what in the hay are you doing up so early?
I heard a crash.
Apple Bloom said.
I heard
She
a
maneuvered her
crash
way
and I
into the
came
kitchen,
downstairs to
making
see
sure
what was
not to
up.
knock over the precariously
I mean, did you not hear the crash, Applejack? I mean, your sister's down there.
stacked jars.
How long have you been up? How'd you make all this jam?
Once I got a little more focused, the rest was easy. Don't you worry none, little sis. I'll have all the jam jarred and ready for sale 2 days earlier than
Correction, she drank a potion to keep herself awake.
expected. And we can meet the He'll get his order all right.
Oh, yeah.
Applejack said, speaking
Approved.
so quickly it was hard for Apple Bloom to hear or understand what she was saying. Apple Bloom took and accidentally hit the kitchen table, where a complete jar of jam wobbled and threatened to fall. Apple Bloom gasped and tried to catch it before it hit the ground, but Applejack beat her to it, swiping the jar from midair and settling it down on the ground before hurrying back to the jam she was making. Apple Bloom blinked a couple times in awe of her sister's speed and agility. Had she always been this focused?
How many jars do you think you've got
She's
here,
fast as
sis?
fuck, man.
I don't recall making this much jam last year, and we weren't even able to get most of the trees yesterday.
Oh, I finished the bucking too.
Finished the bucking?
What?
All of them?
Yep, we'll have more jam this season than ever before.
Wait, that potion is that fucking strong. Wow. Dude, imagine farmers had this. They could fucking get all their crops in one whole day. That's amazing.
But when did...
She drank the whole potion, though. I wonder if she was supposed to maybe, like, have a drop of it in her throat.
Granny and I
Maybe not
could
like the
help
whole
make
thing.
Jam.
You don't have to worry about that this year, little sis. I got you covered.
But Granny promised.
The thing is, Apple Bloom, Granny's got a lot on her plate now with Big Mac being gone, and I just figured that I could get the jam done a whole lot faster.
But it just ain't fair. I already told the Crusaders they could come and help out with this year's batch.
Sometimes you can't have what you want. That's just how life goes.
That is
Apple
true.
Bloom, I'm not arguing about this now.
But Applejack...
I said no!
Oh, Jesus Christ.
She turned to Apple Bloom and growled with a slight twitch in her eye.
Jesus.
Apple Bloom felt the pit of her stomach drop and backed away from her nervously. She had never seen her sister so angry before, and it frightened her. After a moment or so of silence, Applejack blinked a few times and shook her head, returning to the pot of jam.
I was just gonna ask if I could help you.
Apple Bloom whispered. Applejack paused for a moment and looked back at her little sister with a frown.
I'm sorry, sis. Why don't you just run along and play instead? I'm doing just fine on my own.
Applejack said, the tone in her words letting Apple Bloom know that the decision was final. Defeated and slightly hurt by her sister's words, Apple Bloom left the kitchen while fighting back a sniffle.